Okay, perfect. So anyway, as reported, I'm Keith, and I'm one of the original 8 kids that started Food Not Bombs. And I was 22 at that time, and I was studying painting and sculpture. And to get a degree, I also had to take academic classes, and one of them was American history with Professor Howard Zinn. And so he wrote a book called The People's History of the United States. Passed away about 2 years ago, I guess now. And he would talk about these protests he was going to up in Seabrook, New Hampshire to stop the nuclear power station. And so me and my classmates organized what we called an affinity group, and we went up to a bunch of the protests, including the May 24th, 1980 occupation attempt of the construction site. And Brian was a law student at BU, got arrested at this event, and so we had to raise money for his legal defense. And the first thing that came in mind was to do bake sales. So we'd be at the student union selling our brownies and our cookies and everything. And of course we'd make like $3, $4, and we're like, wow, this will never become a defense fund at this rate. And along with doing that, like most college students, we had to make a living in all kinds of ways. And we had a van, old Dodge van, and we had a moving company with this van called Smooth Move. And we were moving this family one day, and they were throwing out a poster that said, wouldn't it be a beautiful day if the schools had all the money they needed and the Air Force had to hold the bake sale to buy a bomber? And we thought, this is fantastic. So we go to the Army-Navy surplus store at Central Square. We buy some military uniforms. We make little general badges. And we go out with our poster and our baked goods. And we tell people we're trying to buy a bomber, help us out. And people would go by and go, wow, you don't really look like soldiers. And we go, well, you know, we're down on our luck. We're trying to raise money. And in those days, Ronald Reagan was famous for like a $3,500 bolt for a bomber, where you could go to the hardware store and get the same bolt for 30 cents. So we had our bolt on the table. We say, we're making headway. We've got the bolt. Help us out. Buy a cookie. And people were like, wow, that's like, seems a little crazy. And then eventually we admit to the fact that our friend had been in jail and we were trying to raise money for his legal defense, and we talked to him about why we were against Seabrook Nuclear Power Station and the nuclear arms race and stuff. And then I was also a produce worker in the mornings at a grocery store called Bread and Circus, which is sort of similar to Whole Foods that we have now. Before that time, they were either, you know, kind of commercial grocery stores or the food co-ops. And so I was working at Bread and Circus in the morning, and people, I'd keep coming in every morning seeing that a lot of the produce hadn't sold, and it was kind of disheartening. So I started taking the wilted produce and the stuff that was a little bruised or didn't look perfect to the housing projects a couple of blocks from the grocery store on Portland Ave. And one day I'm hanging out with the people that I'm giving the food to, and they were talking and said, isn't that weird, your buildings are falling down, but they just put this huge glass building across the street from you. And they go, yeah, that's where they're designing nuclear bombs. And so I looked into it, and it turned out it was Draper Lab, and they were designing the guidance system for intercontinental nuclear missiles. So that gave us the idea to have the name Food Not Bombs, since there were people on one side of Portland Ave that needed food and people on the other side that didn't need the food because they were making so much money building bombs. So